Hi, everybody. My name is Tracy DiPeralta.
Hi, welcome to Pathways Day. My name is Nikki Swire.
The Pathways team would like to welcome you to our 5th annual Pathways Day,
Where we are very proud to celebrate the accomplishments of our students of the class of 2018.
Pathways is a program that strives to provide adult learners with unique learning paths individualized to each student in our program.
And a program strongly supported by our faculty, providing mentorship based on our students' individualized interests.
Today, we have the great pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Timothy McKay, an astrophysicist and the Arthur Thurnau Professor of Physics at the University of Michigan.
But before we do that, Tracy, please tell me, how did you do with physics as an undergrad at UC Davis?
Nikki, we don't want to talk about that right now.
Oh, okay. Well, moving on. Dr. McKay completed his BS at Temple University in Philadelphia with a summa cum laude before going on to complete his PhD at the University of Chicago in 1992.
He then became a fellow at the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory before joining the physics faculty at the University of Michigan in 1995.
Today, Dr. McKay is not only a professor of physics, astronomy, and education, he is also the director of the honors program at the University of Michigan College of Literature, Science, and the Arts.
Dr. McKay is an expert in learning analytics and is currently devoted to developing a new educational software using learning analytics to develop customized curriculum and study strategies for each individual student within a program.
So please, let's extend a warm welcome to Dr. Timothy McKay.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to have a chance to talk with you about some of the work that is going on in my research group and with myself right now. I think that the idea of working on these topics, let me just close this and open my presentation. I got it, is, it's really absorbing for me. It's taking a lot of my energy right now. And I decided for today's talk that I wanted to talk a little bit differently from what I've been talking about a lot of the time lately. Use this opportunity to move forward my own thinking a little bit. So I decided to talk about something that felt to me like it would resonate with the Pathways program. So the Pathways program is all about individualized pathways for people. It's about being unique, about having your own way through the education system. And I want to work off of that with this idea of quantifying uniqueness. I've been spending a lot of time trying to understand how it is we characterize the student experience so that we can understand it better, so that we can learn from it, and hopefully so that we can make it better. I'm thinking about how we characterize the student experience, particularly in an information age. This is a kind of classic University of Michigan picture. A stadium full of people, right? That's what we do here at Michigan. It might just look like a sea of faces all the same, but in fact, every one of these people is an individual. And an important goal for us here at the University of Michigan is to find ways to both educate at scale, to teach this many people, but to do that in a way which is personalized, So I want to talk at the beginning here about identity and what identity means in an information age. So I could ask, who are you? But it would take a long time to go around the room and hear from every one of you. So let's talk about who I am instead and use that to do something about information. So who am I? You could describe me with a whole bunch of different kinds of labels. And the first set of labels you might use are kind of bureaucratic, meant to be unique labels. In fact, one of them we call your unique name here at Michigan, because it's meant to identify you. The government uses a different kind of unique name, which is so unique I won't even share what it is. My social security number. And then there's your name. You think of your name as like, that's who you really are, your name, right? Except there's at least one other Tim McKay on this campus. Right? And I feel sorry for him because he gets a lot of email that he's not supposed to get. So there are identifiers that are kind of these unique, bureaucratic identifiers. There are things that refer to what kind of person you are, like what is your profession, what do you work on. So for me, that includes things like cosmologist and astronomer, but also physicist and data scientist and professor an education researcher. These are the kind of things that might be somewhere high on your CV or on your LinkedIn profile. You know, who are you? You're these kinds of things. All right? There could be personal characteristics. Male, white, Midwesterner, 53, early riser. You know, characteristics that might characterize who you really are. And then there could be professional qualifications like a Bachelor of Science in Physics, a PhD in Physics, the classic elements of a student record like what was your GPA? What was your SAT score, right? These things that you think of as characteristic of people. So in a way, identity is a collection of descriptors that are all used by people around us to try and understand who we are. And there are good things about this. It's a very effective part of the system we use, but there are also real problems. Like, different people might interpret what it means to be a professor in very different ways. It might be very positive for some people, very negative for other people. It certainly wouldn't be what I think it means when I say I'm a professor. So these kind of categorizations, useful but also somewhat problematic. And then there's all kinds of really personal things, like I like to cook, I'm a second tenor, I ride a bicycle, right? I'm a birder. All kinds of characteristics that would describe who you are. So sometimes identity is a list of traits and experiences, labels for categories. That can work well, but if you want to control your identity, then you need to control what categories you're being placed in. Right? You need to make sure the world knows what you think being in that category means. Right? You need to be able to do that. You want the world to understand that you're not exactly like everyone else that's in that group. So once you're grouped together, that's one of the problems, is everybody thinks you're exactly the same as everybody in that group. And it's never true. Right? And you want these labels to evolve. This is something that's become particularly problematic in the information age. In the past, we used to be able to forget what happened in the past. And now you can't, because it's all on YouTube. Right? And it'll be there forever. It's really different. So this is one of the things that I think about a lot. The most important point about identity is that each of us is unique, a unique and very intersecting set of all the experiences and traits that we've ever had. We're all individuals. And the systems we work in should be able to recognize that and act on it and foster it instead of kind of forcing people into the same kinds of tracks. Now that said, it is essential that we should be individuals and treated as individuals, but there are times when it is really fun to be part of a group of people, and we just had one of those times here at the University of Michigan. So there are days when everyone around is a Wolverine, and it is great to have that happen. So these things about identity have actually always been true, that we are classified by a set of descriptors that may be used in good or bad ways to understand who we really are. So what's new about this in the information age? Why am I here talking about it in a new kind of way? The first reason is that the sheer quantity of information that exists about every one of us is much larger than it has ever been in the past. None of us leads a life which is unobserved anymore. And that's something we all have to wrestle with, we have to think about. The nature of the information that's available about all of us is much richer and more diverse than it used to be. So it used to be, for instance, that a student's schoolwork, all the work that they turned in, would be reviewed by their teacher, assigned a grade, given back to them, and disappear. It was gone. That's not true anymore. The systems that we use now keep records of everything that's ever done in a way that they never did before. The past doesn't fade in the same way that it used to. This is why most of us are terrified of the word viral. Right? You don't want anything to become viral, because if it becomes, your life is over. That will follow you forever. That one stupid thing you said, right? Follow you forever. So that's another reason it's different in the information age, worth thinking about. And the last thing, which I think we haven't fully all understood yet, is that information about us used to be interpreted mostly by people. The way decisions were made that were important is that individuals came to know things about you, and they used that to decide how they would interact with you. But now a lot of that is happening not with people. It's happening through algorithms. So we had in our house this week a famous example that echoes another very famous example of algorithms running. My daughter Isabel is 25 years old. She's a graduate student at the University of Arizona. Something that she did online convinced an algorithm that she was pregnant. And a sample box from Similac arrived at our house here in Ann Arbor. So somehow they figured out that she was pregnant, but didn't know where she lived. So algorithms can be both good and bad, right? It was really very weird. We had to have that phone call. Hey, dear, what's going on? So that's something new. And I've been thinking about this a lot, about how things are changing in the information age. Lots of really interesting books being written about this right now. I mentioned just down here, one by one of our colleagues here at Michigan, John Cheney-Lippold, called We Are Data, that I think is really very powerful. Kathy O'Neill's Weapons of Math Destruction. And Virginia Eubanks wrote a very powerful book called Automating Inequality that just came out this year. So lots to think about in this space. For all of us, it's really not something any of us can avoid, right? It's not a specialty topic. So I want to talk about quantifying uniqueness, and I want to use mostly an example that almost everyone in this room shares. You all have a student record. It's the thing you started to hear about first in elementary school where somebody said, that's going to go on your permanent record, right? We've all been through education systems, so we've all faced this. So it's a nice example because we all know something about it. It's also the one that I happen to be working on. I want to talk about some history. Where did this permanent record come from? It actually hasn't always been around. Why are things changing about this permanent record now? And what might something like a transcript of the future look like? If there's something new and possible now, what's it going to look like? I'll just mention that a lot of broader thinking about this is contained in a new online education tool called a Teach-Out that Michigan is now making. We made one. I made it with the university's Chief Privacy Officer, Saul Berman, recently. It's called Privacy, Identity, and Reputation in the Information Age. And this Teach-Out will be opening again on April 23rd for people to join. So if you're interested in this topic, lots more information out there. All right, let's start with that history. How did your permanent record emerge? Has it always been here? Where did it come from? It's wrapped up in the history of higher education and of education in general in the United States. So let me say some words about history. Public higher education has always really been about creating citizens, and we've been doing it here at Michigan for a long time. This is University Hall, which was constructed in 1871. The total enrollment of the university at that time was 1,200 students, every part of the university. There was an auditorium in this building that seated 3,000, even though there were only 1,200 students. Because they were making plans, right? This was not going to be a place that stayed small. That auditorium was very beautiful. You can see a picture of it here. It was the place where all big campus-wide meetings like graduations took place and stuff like that. They built it to make sure there could be such a place for the campus, a gathering place. But the campus wasn't going to stop growing. So by 1900, enrollment had tripled to about 3,500 students, and by 1950, it had expanded by an additional factor of 10 to well over 40,000 students. We became really the national model for the modern research university, and universities all across the country have emulated that model since then. Indoor graduation was impossible, so we started moving outdoors at Ferry Field. This is a 1949 picture of commencement at Ferry Field. And just because I love this other photo, here's another view of that same 1949 commencement. You can see Ferry Field here, Yost Arena. The rest of the athletic campus doesn't exist yet, right? I love watching the students file in here, and you see the way they're filling these sections? I think that's by GPA. Right? I mean, I'm not sure it is, but it looks kind of like maybe a histogram. So we'll assume that's the case. So you can see the future stretched out behind that. So this of course, was commencement in 2010 at the Big House, a bigger crowd than usual. You could sort of make out who was speaking there on the stadium Jumbotron, and that's why the crowd was bigger than usual. It was Barack Obama, of course. So the 20th century started with this industrial revolution. And the university joined that. Higher education joined it. We blew up in scale, became gigantic, and we adopted a whole bunch of industrial approaches to running that system, right? So we created things like standardized tests. All those standardized tests didn't exist before the 1920s, right? The things that are so deeply embedded in our society right now. We invented the credit hour as an exchange mechanism to say this class is equal to that class, right? We created GPAs, majors, minors, all this stuff. It didn't exist before that, right? So it's not like you can't have a higher education system without it, because we did have one without it. In fact, we didn't even have grades here at the University of Michigan until 1912. Before that, there were 3 designations: passed, not passed. You didn't fail, you just hadn't passed, which was pretty different. And then there was something called conditioned, which is a real-world accommodation to the fact that sometimes a faculty member would look at a student's work and say, you know, you really shirked off a little bit, and I want to send you back to study for 2 more weeks, right? It was this in-between thing. Okay. So these things, the modern academic record, the transcript, all of it, it's a product of a higher education system that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. This is something called a Google Ngram. Have you guys ever heard of this? So Google scanned about 14 million books, recorded all the words that were in those books, and allows you to search for words and say, how often do those words appear in books as a function of time? And their record goes back to 1800. And you see the words academic record don't appear, don't appear, don't appear. 1900, they start to appear. You get to about 1940, boom, and they explode. This is when universities exploded. We created these things to do for bureaucratic purposes. And so the reputation of this transcript emerges from, as being something you cannot change. You can't change the transcript. Oh my God, you can't change the transcript. That comes from the fact that it comes from this industrial kind of mentality. This morning I was asking myself, are people going to believe this, that this really appeared at this moment? Maybe they just think there were no words in books before that. So just to prove it, here's the one I just showed you with academic record, nothing before 1900. Here's college and university. So colleges and universities have been in the book record all this time. Academic record, transcript, and stuff like that wasn't. Really appeared in that era. And the transcript, here's an example. If you get a University of Michigan transcript right now, this is exactly what it looks like. Right? It was meant to fit in an envelope because it was created for an era where you had to fold it up and mail it off, right? We don't live in that era anymore. There's no reason that a transcript has to be 2 pages long, that it can't even fit in the name of the class. Right? So what you get is int, stat, and data annals, instead of Introduction to Statistics and Data Analysis, right? Not only is there not a description of the class, but you barely can tell what the title is, right? It has grades. It has a bunch of numbers which don't always mean anything to anyone. Do you know what Michigan honor points are? Probably a lot of you had them. It's an obscure way of calculating GPA that we invented here at Michigan. And it's still on the transcript, even though nobody knows what it means. So the transcript of the future doesn't have these constraints. It doesn't have to go by snail mail. It doesn't have to be small. It doesn't have to be made of only one kind of thing. It could be anything we want. Right? We can do all kinds of new things. And so I believe we should be thinking about how we describe and reflect on the student experience in a way which takes advantage of what we can do now that we couldn't do in the past. And so I've been working with a team of people to consider what some of the possibilities are. Before I go further, though, I want to say something about this idea of categories. I mentioned it at the beginning. I said, you could put me in a category. You could say that I'm a physicist, or you could say that I'm an astronomer, right? These categories. Data systems and algorithms in particular like categories. They don't like to consider ambiguity or complexity. They want you to be lumped into a group. People do it too. When you walk down the street and you encounter a person you don't know, the first thing you do is recognize that they belong to certain categories. Right? Male and female is one of the first things most people perceive. And it shapes immediately how you might interact with a person. Social class and wealth, jumps out at you, right? So we do this too. And on both sides, the categorical representation of people is problematic. People are not categories. They're individuals. And all the traits that they have are not lumped together. They're complete continua. And so getting back to the idea that everything is analog, really, reality is analog, it's not really digital, is important for doing this kind of work right, I think. So good examples of that include the fact that a transcript lists only the course name and number. But not every course is the same when it has the same name and number. Right? You might have taken that course in spring term with 30 people, or in fall term with 800 people. You might have taken it from a great instructor or a poor instructor. A lot of variance might be hiding in that. And the transcript also only lists a grade without context. I'll show you some data later to show that very different grades are given out in different kinds of classes, even when the same students take them. Right? So the grade has context that's important. Student records list things like gender and age and first-gen status and race, all of which are much blurrier than they look in the data, much more complex. So none of these things is really categorical. And if we really want to understand them better, we should have context and some understanding of the intersections of all of these identities in order to really interpret them. OK, why are things changing now? So I just told you sort of how we got here, why the student record is kind of the way it is. Let's talk a little bit about why things are changing now. I think the big reason that things are changing now is because of the information age, right? Many of the educational activities which take place now are digitally mediated. That means they happen through some kind of computer system. You turn in your homework online. You do your homework online. A videotape is made of a lecture. All these different ways in which it is digitally mediated. That means a record is left of all of those things. And an opportunity exists to see what everyone is doing and to interpret it and to work with it in a way that just didn't exist before. That new opportunity is what we're going to work on right now. I believe that having all this information, being able to see and understand and attend to each individual student, gives us an opportunity to personalize education in a way we've never been able to do before. And I'll just note here that the parallel between the promise of personalized education and the promise of personalized health care is very strong. So if you're thinking about the way you might be treating patients in the future, you're not going to be treating them as categories, but as individuals with individual rich historical records, right? That's something people haven't had the opportunity to do in the past. And I think you'll be wrestling with many of the same issues I'm talking about here. Okay, so what do I mean by personalization? What I really mean is attending to and responding to difference in different ways. So every student we have on this campus is unique. We've always done a lot of personalization, right? Usually that happens in a small class, where a faculty member can get to know their students, can understand who they are as individuals, and can respond to that difference. It's what great teachers always do. Here at Michigan, we do that sometimes very well in small courses, in research experiences, one-on-one mentoring. We do a lot of really great personalization. But we often do it very poorly as well, particularly when people are doing things at scale, in large classes, general advising. Building community across the whole student body is a difficult thing to do. I think this part, the industrial part of what happens here at the University of Michigan, is the main place where we can use data to improve things, to make the experience much more personalized. And that's kind of what we're working on. A modern student record should allow us to do this. It should let us attend to every student, both as a student, to assess what they know and represent their skills and accomplishments, but also as a person. Right? We need to understand where people are coming from, what's their background. We need to know what they're interested in, what their goals are, how they think about their identity and how that evolves with time, what concerns they have, what is their purpose, their affect at a particular moment, their sense of well-being. All of these things are things that require us to know a lot about the student in order to be able to interact with them. Often, the academic information we have is not that good at telling us what they know. So getting better information, even on the academic side, is important. And then we need to use this student record to act at scale. We ought to be learning from the experience of every student who's here, and we ought to be attending to every student who's here in real time. Okay. So who should be looking at the student record? I think there's a bunch of different audiences for the student record, and that we should think about how to address all of them. The first most important audience for the student record is the student, right? We produce a student record to help a student understand how they're progressing through the curriculum and to see whether they're accomplishing the goals that we have for them to, we expect them to achieve. The institution also, of course, looks at student records, needing to support instruction and think about assessment. Other educational institutions are a key audience. In fact, if you go to the registrar's office, Paul Robinson's registrar's office here at the University of Michigan now, and you ask him, who orders up transcripts? Employers never order up transcripts. Employers verify degrees. They want to know you got your degree. But they don't care what classes you took. The people who really care what classes you took are graduate and professional programs, other educational institutions. So they're really the outside audience, not employers so much. I mean, their interest is really pretty slight. The government asks us to report things and stuff too. That's not as important. So mostly it's about us, the student, the institution, and other educational institutions like us. I'm going to focus on the student because I think the way we record data shapes how students approach their education. And there are a lot of good things about that, but there are some very bad things about it too. And I would like to change the way that happens. So why? How does the student experience, the student record shape the college experience? I think everything that we record is elevated importance. You know, that's why people told you in elementary school that this was going on your permanent record, right? Because the permanent record mattered. And things that go on your permanent record matter. And things that don't go on your permanent record don't matter. So the things we record and don't record affect the way students approach them. We record grades. We don't record authentic effort or accomplishment or risky failure. We just record grades. And so people pursue grades. We have requirements that people must meet. We don't talk about how many opportunities you pursued. We just talk about how many requirements you met, right? So if we could change that, that would help. We record curricular activities, although most students on campus now believe most of the important things they do are extracurricular. And we don't record them, so we should think about how to do that. If we want students to focus on things, we should measure it and report it, and especially we should report it to them, and especially we should report it to them in context so they can see how they're doing compared to other people. All right. So let's talk about this. There's an idea we should record other kinds of things. What might those other kinds of things be? What might a transcript of the future look like? What might it include? And I should say, this is a big space. There's a lot of things we could do here. I'm going to describe one very simple kind of next step that moves beyond having a single number on your transcript, which is a GPA, to having a set of numbers that represent a multidimensional view of what education looks like instead of a unidimensional performance view. Okay. I think the thing we can add to transcripts that is not there right now is context. So transcripts right now say what happened to this student, but you have no idea how that relates to every other student here or anywhere else or any other kind of experience. So you have to kind of project that on the student's transcript. So if we could give things context, we could say what it means to take these classes, what it's like to complete this major, what it means to receive these grades. Were these grades easy to get or hard to get? Where is this student in the universe of University of Michigan graduates? Context is what I think we need. If we gave this context, then students could use it to understand where they are in this universe of University of Michigan students and to try to get to the part where they want to be. Without it, they're making up that picture, and they don't have the information that they need. So if we could provide this information, what kinds of things should we add? So I believe that a good liberal education consists of many elements, and these are some of them. A good liberal education should include intellectual breadth. It should include disciplinary depth. It should include a wide range of experiences, not just coming to lecture classes and taking tests, but also being an intern, working in a research project, doing service, joining a social group, right? All of those different kinds of experiences. A really good education only happens with a lot of effort. Imagine a transcript that actually reported effort. That would be different, right? You come to a residential institution in part to form a broad array of networks of people. Is that happening well? If you're a student, are you forming good networks of people or not? And then, of course, academic performance is one of the things we'd like to report, although I'd like to report it better than we do today. So I want to talk about how could we measure these kinds of things using the data that we have today, and what might it look like? What would it tell us about our campus to measure effort for our students? What would we find if we did that? All right, so we're engaging in an effort to do these kinds of things. So the first one, measures of academic engagement and effort. This is hard. We don't measure everything we'd like to here, but there are some things that we know. We know what classes people take very well, and we could try to figure out who's taking a lot of hard classes and who's not. We could try. It's worth trying. So we've been doing that. So a class could be difficult for all kinds of reasons. It could be that the subject matter is hard. Some subject matters are probably harder than others, and especially for individuals. It might be especially hard for you. Some courses are hard because they give you a ton of work, right? So we could try to measure the workload. And some courses are hard in the sense that they award a lot of low grades. Now, they might be hard in these other ways, challenging and a lot of workload, or not. I don't really know. But I can see that they give out a lot of low grades. So they're courses that are hard to get good grades in. So we could try to quantify any of these things. And so we've been working on this. We tried using student evaluations to quantify course difficulty. And we found not very much data there, really, and a lot of heavy volunteer bias. So the people who actually do student evaluations are not the same as everybody who takes the class, unfortunately. So we didn't find this super useful. Instead, we've been focusing our efforts on trying to quantify how hard it is to get a good grade, because we have a lot of good data for that. How hard is it to get a good grade in a class? Okay? So we've done a little bit of modeling in this. Let me give you some details. What we did is we modeled every student's grade in every class as a combination of two effects. One is your student effect. How good a student are you? That's something we can see across all your classes, not just in this class. So we estimate it using all your classes, not just this class. Then there's something we call the course effect. If a course is just a course that likes to give people low grades, this course effect will be low. Right? It's just a course that gives people low grades. It doesn't matter who takes it. And then there's a noise term in this model, right, because you need to include that. So this course fixed effect is a student ability independent measure of the difficulty of getting a good grade. So it accounts for the fact that some courses have great students in them and some courses have weaker students in them. It accounts for that fact. And the student effect is a course difficulty independent measure of student performance, accounting for the fact that some students take really hard courses and some students take easy courses, right? So we're learning something about what that pattern looks like on campus. So let's look at some results. Here's some real University of Michigan classes. We have people who are Michigan undergrads here, I know, at least some. These are the top 20 courses that are the hardest to get a good grade in on this campus, okay? And what you're looking at is the course fixed effect, which tells you something about the mean grade given out in these classes. So MCDB 427, anybody here take that class? Yeah, I figured there had to be at least a few. Good for you. You made it through. So that is a course that actually gives out a mean grade quite a bit higher than that. But the students who take the class are actually great. So in order to get down to that mean grade, it has to really drag them down. And it does. That's what it does. In fact, all these courses that are on this side are kind of in that category. You take these classes, your GPA is going down. Not your fault. It's a practice of the courses. I think the course I'm teaching right now doesn't quite make the list, but the one that follows it, Physics 240, is here. Right, so close to the list. I don't think we should be proud of this. I don't think we should be ashamed of it. It's a fact that we have a different kind of grading scheme going on. On the other side are the 20 easiest classes to get a good grade in. That doesn't mean they're easy classes, but they're easy to get a good grade in. A bunch of language classes and things like that. Things that people really take as electives. No one's forced to take these classes. So they've come up with a different set of norms about grading. If you look at these two classes, what this means, this 2.6 here and this 3.6 here, is that if the same student took these two classes, they'd get a grade a letter grade apart. That's what this model says, letter grade apart. Pretty big difference. So when we throw out all the grades that students get and we say they're the same, they're not. Right? So we're kind of muddying the water by not showing that. Okay? Here's a histogram of the mean course fixed effects by student. And so you can see students at Michigan, some of them are having the kind of the mean class they take be here, where they give out low grades, and some people are over here. It's pretty spread. That's about as spread as the distribution of GPAs on campus. So we could measure the difficulty of courses that people are taking. What would it be like if we reported this? I mean, at least if you're a student who's taking these hard classes, someone would know. Right? That might be nice. Right now, it's not so obvious that that's true. Okay. These are the course effects related to mean grade. Yeah, I'm going to skip over that. It's too much to explain. How do different majors vary? Right? Because the students who take, who complete a major receive their grades in courses that are different. So here's biology. You can see it peaks around 3. Here's biopsych and cognitive science. Cognitive science, about 3.3. Here's economics, again, pretty close to 3. Here's communications, about 3.4. Right? So the mix of classes people take in different majors correspond to different course fixed effects and probably to different course difficulties. And here's musical theater, the highest one. Perfectly fine. I love the musical theater program. I donate money to them. They're fantastic. It's just very different from other programs on campus, right? People come here to sing and dance together. They're given good grades when they sing and dance well. That's fine, right? It's just, but to call the grades the same is crazy, right? Okay. Now, I just showed you course effects which are related to effort. What about student performance after accounting for these variations in grade norms? And I have just one kind of rough figure to show you here. What this is showing you is students who have a GPA around 2.8. Where are they on this scale of student effect? Okay? And you can see they're mostly negative, which means that students who have low GPAs are typically not doing as well as average on campus. Right? Not a surprise, but there's quite a spread. In fact, there's some people with low GPAs that are almost average Michigan students because they took a lot of really hard classes. Right? In the middle, you see mean GPA students are mostly average, and students who have higher GPAs are mostly above average. So this doesn't change the picture completely, but it modulates it. You know, some of the people who are above average are way above average, and some of the people who are above average are a little above average. And you could pick that apart and understand that a little better with this kind of measure. Okay. All right. What about the nature of course taking? So 2 students come through the university, they take different kinds of classes. How do you say 2 students were similar or different? And how different? How would you measure difference if you looked at all the courses that people take? So let me show you a mathematical way to do that. Imagine you list every course available on campus. We've done this now. The list we use is about 4,500 classes. 4,500 classes that you could take on campus. Each student has taken some of those. So this student took this one and that one, but not these, right? So the students list is 4,500 long with some ones and some zeros. Each student has one of these. You can actually form something called the inner product of these 2 things. And it's basically measuring how far apart these two students are. It's a dot product. Anybody remember a dot product from physics? Yeah, kind of. Measures collinearity, okay? So this number is a similarity number. It's 1 if they took parallel identical tracks. So if 2 students took exactly the same courses, this number would be 1. It's 0 if they took none of the same courses. So it lets us explore similarity and difference in all different kinds of ways. We can take 2 students and say how similar were they in their experience here on campus. So one thing we've done is to look at the internal similarity in majors. Everybody took this major. How similar were they all? If they're in a major which is very prescriptive, that tells you must take all these classes, they're going to be pretty similar. And I just noticed that dental hygiene is the most similar major on this campus, which won't surprise you probably. It's probably pretty prescriptive. What they have to take is what they have to take. On the other end of the spectrum, we have very low high student autonomy kind of majors. A lot of classic liberal arts majors like history, anthropology are down here. The most independent, the individualized concentration program. The Pathways program of the College of Literature, Science, and Arts. People make up their own majors, so of course they're not the same. But it's kind of neat that you can see it. It comes right out in the data. You could ask for every graduating student, okay, you're a physics major, so we know you completed a physics major, but you were probably a lot like a couple other majors. And right now we don't say anything about the fact that you were almost a math major. But we could, right? So we could say you finished your physics and math major, but you were 85% astrophysics and 60% statistics and 20% history. Why not roll that up and let people see that on their transcripts? You know, you kind of did some specialization in statistics. It doesn't count according to the official 20th century bureaucratic system, but you actually did 60% of it. Why not record that? So the new transcript could include the top 8 things that you were most like, because why not? Not hard to do. You could look at the general content of majors. Let me see if I can explain this. This is the social sciences on this axis. This is the humanities on that axis. And this is the natural sciences on this axis. And what we're looking at is a bunch of majors. Where do they land? The social science majors are in blue. They're over here with a lot of social science, not much humanities, and not much science. The natural sciences are here in red. They have a lot of science, not much social science, not much humanities, right? The cool thing is that the humanities, the traditional liberal arts degrees, are spread much more broadly. Those traditional liberal arts degrees really are liberal arts. They really do give students broader educations than the other disciplines do. You could put individual students into this map, and I'll just point out one thing. The English BA is mostly in humanities, but you can see there's a ton of English students with a lot of science, these points that move up in this direction. Those are English majors who are pre-meds. You want to talk about a liberal arts education? That's a pretty good one. Be an English major and be a pre-med. You take a lot of science, but you also get a very broad view of the humanities. Pretty cool. I'm not even going to try and explain that one. I can almost always remember what it actually shows, but maybe not today. Okay, so we talked about 3 things so far. We talked about effort, we talked about academic performance, and we talked about the breadth of your program. What about disciplinary depth? How deep did each student go within their discipline? So if we make a plot of this for physics students, what we can see is that a very simple thing, just like what is the average course number of the courses you took in your physics major, varies a lot. Some students are really on a pathway toward graduate school or taking a lot of advanced classes, and some are not. That's okay. It just means they had different disciplinary depth, but we might want to reflect that in a way on their program. And I would really want to emphasize that it's not like breadth and depth are opposites. You can have a lot of breadth and a lot of depth. Right? You can have both. Okay? How would you explore the range of experience that each student had? How might you think about exploring the range of experience that each student had? Well, one thing you could ask is, what's the nature of their classroom experience? We've been studying this lately here at Michigan. And what you find at Michigan is that a lot of students' classes are less than 40 in size. But a handful of them are bigger than 200. Right? So how much time did you spend over here? And how much time did you spend over there? You have a different kind of experience. We could tote that up for people in order to understand the nature of a student's experience. Okay? What about the networks of connection for students? How are students connected? We've been looking at this by looking at the courses people take. If you take a course with another student, you're connected to them. If two courses are taken by the same student, they're connected as well. So you could make these measures of networks of connection between courses. Courses are connected by students, and students are connected by courses that they take together. You can see this whole network on campus of who takes courses with whom and how often. Lots of factors influence that. I'll show you just one result. This is a network diagram that shows how different things are connected. And you can see over here a whole bunch of hard sciences, biology, this is mostly the life sciences over here, mathematics and physics living off on their own, social sciences like this, and economics pulls way out of the rest of social science. It is a social science, but it's a really different one. Right? It's a very mathematical one. It shares something with math and physics that psychology and political science don't. So you could begin to study how are all these things connected in these different kinds of ways. Traditional distinctions like natural science and social science, they don't work so well in this kind of space. So we're finding out what's really going on. The last thing I want to say is something about intellectual breadth. How much effort did each student put into studying and interacting across traditional boundaries? Right? So that's one of the things we think is important in a liberal education. What does it look like? These are measures of that intellectual breadth. If you're way over here on the side, then you're mostly doing things with the same kind of people. If you're spread out in this direction, then you're often working with people who aren't like you. So there's musical theater again. Like I said, I love this program. I love to look at it. It's extreme. Everybody's the same. They come together and they sing and dance together. Except for this guy. He was a joint English and musical theater major. So there he is, right? Okay, he did something different. Kind of cool. Philosophy, more spread, especially this philosophy pre-med. Right? And then there's general studies. General studies, wide open kind of curriculum. People are not that similar. In fact, when this goes negative, it means these people are less likely to take courses with general studies majors than they are to take courses with other people. They're driven away from other general studies majors, which is pretty wild. So you can make measures of these kinds of things. You can make measures of these kinds of things and reflect on them. So I think the transcript of the future may be a dashboard that looks like this, with a whole bunch of dials, and a student can think about, ooh, that one's a little low, I'm going to make that one better. Or I'm going to make a trade-off. I want to be intellectually broad, and I'm okay having a lower disciplinary depth, because I'm deciding who I want to be. When there's only one number, a GPA on there, you have no choice, right? You can pursue it, or you can fail. Here, there would be choice and a way of thinking about different kinds of approaches to what you do. So I'm just going to finish up by saying these measures are good for students, and that's the most important reason we use them. But they're also helping us understand the institution and to think about what's different between a Michigan education and a Carleton education. Right? If we use this kind of information, we might be able to learn. Right now, we just sort of make it up. Oh, I think a Carleton education is good for this, and a Michigan education is good for that. Right? That's about it. Okay. So when I finish, I'm thinking a lot now about what we need to do in order to realize what I see as the promise of this kind of personalized education. We live in this data-rich world, and there's a ton of work to be done on this. There's all kinds of research to be done, just as there is in personalized medicine. Lots of research to be done to understand how we should use this data. There are huge administrative challenges. How do we move this data around in a way that respects personal privacy, in a way that actually works for the benefit of the people that we're working with, instead of for profit, for example? How do we think about new shared conceptions of privacy? I think students, in a way, like to be known, but not too much, and not in the wrong spaces and places, right? So having a shared understanding of that so that both students and the people who are working with them are comfortable with what's going on, actually want what's going on, will be essential to figuring out what we have to do to personalize education in its next century. So I look forward to an era where we get rid of the industrial version of the university and create a new information age version of the university that looks and feels different, so that all of your children, when they come to the university, won't have the same I'm only a number experience that you might have had in some parts of your own. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Oh, look at that.
From the Pathways team and everybody here.
Ooh, thank you.
So much. We really
I thought it was going to take me much longer to get one of these. Thanks.
And if you're happy, I'll take your mic.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
I had a question.
Were there some questions? Sorry. Here, I'll give this
Oh,
back
it's
to you. I'm
okay.
sorry.
So I'm curious, I mean, this is just really fascinating. And I had to reflect on, and you may take this out of context, but when faculty put together their portfolios, and they have their teaching portfolios, and they have student evaluations, and they have all these pieces and parts, one of the most critical pieces of that is the reflections of the faculty on
Yep,
those.
on what's there. Mm-hmm.
So the context of this whole student evaluation and transcript is important too. So where's the place for the student to provide a reflection and context?
I think that's a great point. You know, so the old transcript had a model which was, we own the data, you can't change it as a student, and we're going to report exactly what we got, right? You can't change your grades or anything like that, right? And there's a value in that because we validate that and we prove to the world that, you know, we really said that. But there's no reason we couldn't open the door to a student creating an entire portfolio of their work, flexible one, so that they could show off different things to different people, because different people want to see different things. And that portfolio could certainly include that kind of reflection. Here I am at the end of college. Here's what I think about what happened in college. Why shouldn't the student provide that context? And in a way which is not like, I mean, anybody could do that now, but it would look like you were making excuses or something.
Right.
It wouldn't be part of the system.
But why did I take that?
Yeah, if it was part of the system,
Why did I not?
that would be really great. So there's huge flexibility in this. No limit to how much information we might put in it. Yeah?
With the sheer masses, 45,000 students in a small, educational institution, how are they able to personalize it for each and every student? And I know that's a hard question to answer, but
So I can tell you one of the things that we're doing right now, which is that the first thing you have to have is a way to see every student, to have information about every student, and ideally rich and real-time information, right? So the fact that so much of this is digitally mediated now gives us that. We can see what people are doing and so on. But then we need to be able to act on it. So we have adopted a tool that was invented in the School of Public Health called the Michigan Tailoring System. It gathers information about people and allows you then to communicate individually to them in a way which you decide what you want to say, and then it delivers these personal messages. That's being used right now in my class to provide students with feedback and encouragement and advice about how they might be more successful in the class in a way which is modulated by their background, their interests, their goals, their current state, you know, all of those things. It's doing what I think I would do if I had enough time to have every student come and sit in my office and tell me all about their background, and I was able to actually absorb all that in my quite limited brain, right? So it's a step toward doing that that doesn't exist now or hasn't existed before. It isn't magic or anything, but it's better.
it's like a system that does an algorithm, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, the algorithm is actually entirely invented by us. There's no machine learning part of it. So it really is experts saying, if I had this person, I would say this. If I had that person, I would say that. So it's not, I mean, it is, of course, an algorithm. It's a mechanism. But it's one that is closer to the human than a lot of the ones that are being run in the big data world right now. And we think that's important. We might be wrong. Maybe an automated algorithm would be better. I'm really not sure. But that's what we're doing.
Any other questions?
Yes? Right. So a lot of this work is happening outside of institutions like this. So LinkedIn is basically allowing you to make things like this. There are a whole bunch of organizations that are trying to gather the data about you so that they can help you reflect it to the world. But remember that LinkedIn is doing it for a reason. They want to own it. They want to sell it. And they're doing that, right? So educational institutions, traditionally, of course, have not done that. We will hold data for you and help you reflect it and everything else, but we won't sell it. We don't have that kind of relationship with our students. So it may be that the commercial world will provide products so much better that everyone will want to use them, even though they might be giving up certain elements of their privacy. So there's an interaction in this space. I think there are universities that are thinking hard about dumping all their stuff into tools like LinkedIn, and they're doing it because they think it's good for their students, and it might be, but it might not. I mean, you've seen what happens when one of these companies gets hacked, for example. So.
Thank you again.
Okay.